Hey guys, Argent Templar here with a reactionary review of The Way of Men by some guy named Jack Donovan, who I don't really know who he is. Apparently he's gay, and apparently he writes for Countercurrents and some other alt-right websites, and he's like some big guy in the manosphere. I don't really know anything about the manosphere, never really been interested into it. Before we proceed, though, other than me admitting I have no idea really who this guy is or what his beliefs are, so I'm kind of coming at this just from what I read in the book. Um, I guess a disclaimer. I'm probably going to piss off a lot of people whenever I do anything criticizing MGTOW or talking about the MRAs or talking about traditional gender roles. It seems to really trigger people, and there's a lot of whining that goes on, and there's a lot of people who post things in a really self-entitled way, and they'll be like, MGTOW 10 Commandments, and I'm like, I'm supposed to know that. Um, so I'll probably get a lot of hate from this. I'll probably try and address some of that, but whatever. Anyway, so this is written by some guy named Jack Donovan. Like I said, I've never been interested in MGTOW. The only MGTOW guy I ever, or no, sorry, I mean the only MRA guy from the Manosphere I ever kind of liked was Bernard Chapin. But he's a lot more based because he at least will talk about political ideas. He is like kind of a political rightist, as opposed to much of the manosphere, which is kind of apolitical. Frankly, I find it very self-indulgent, very nihilistic, and we'll go into that. So, The Way of Men is basically about the idea that what it traditionally means to be a man has been lost in modern society, and that we have to embrace what it was meant to be a man in pre-civilizational times. Now, I'm going to just say a general criticism. This guy does a couple things I really hate. Firstly, he writes an entire book endorsing a theme, and then he puts a couple little disclaimers in at the end, and that's supposed to, like, mean we can't criticize him for what he implied for 95% of the book. Like, for the vast majority of the book, he endorses anarcho-primitivism, and then at the end he says, oh, I understand things were bad beforehand. Okay, well, you can't write an entire book endorsing something and then throw in a couple disclaimers at the end so people can't criticize you. You have to address those issues at the time or moderate your position a bit. And he kind of does this with a lot of issues. Like, I find the book very anti-woman, to be honest, and people are going to say, oh, you're white knighting, Argy. You're white knighting for women, even though you probably think that women shouldn't vote. That you're a white knight. Okay, well, you can call me a white knight, whatever. Um, but he basically says that men need to abandon women for 90% of the book, and then at the end he's like, well, some men I guess can have women, but they should really just hang out around men all the time. So like he just throws some stuff like that in, and that's supposed to um, like soften the other stuff he said. There's also this kind of reductionist materialism where basically he does what psychology does. I consider psychology to be kind of the most passive aggressive. It's frankly kind of just bullying, and I know that sounds really kind of pansy, but it is. It really is. It's inventing a plausible reason for everything. It's there's something called the genetic fallacy, which is if something can explain something, and it kind of sounds okay, it doesn't mean it necessarily explains it. So we're going to kind of take this kind of pseudo-scientific evolutionary biology thing that all sounds good, and we're just going to apply that to everything. And we're also going to do kind of what Marxists do and say, if you disagree with me, it's in bad faith. If you disagree with me, it's because you're an effeminate male who just doesn't get the way of men, or you're just over reliant on a comfortable society. And if you weren't like that, then you would agree with me. So it's kind of taking the view that people can't legitimately have different opinions than you, which is a very kind of left-wing thing. I know I ridicule the left, but I never really question that they believe what they say they believe. I will criticize them sometimes for not living by the standards they set and for acting in bad faith, but I normally will demonstrate that. Like I'll say, the people who support diversity don't live in diversity. That is a verifiable fact. That shows hypocrisy on their part, or at least I think you can speculate in that case that there's something they know that they won't really admit to themselves. And I guess my criticism of the left as social signaling, everything being about status signaling, could kind of be interpreted about this, but I don't know. I feel like I offer other explanations. And I have a small YouTube channel that 360 people subscribe to, so I don't really feel like I'm bound by quite the same rigor when I make kind of these videos that someone who writes a book and is like a celebrity in the men's rights movement is bound by. Anyways, so he basically takes the view that men are built pretty much solely to exist in a tribal level. And it's very interesting because it's a specifically masculine tribal level. It's not even really like women just don't seem to be part of his worldview. I frankly find this book just to hate women. It just views them as kind of materialistic leeches that exist to steal from men. I think at one point he refers to self-perpetualism of society with disdain. He seems to hate children. He seems to think that they're just a drain on resources. That any kind of concept of the purpose in life, having children or having a family or getting married, is just bad. He rejects the idea that men need a woman to complete them. He rejects the idea really that women have any social value. And this is kind of the nihilism you find frequently within MGTOW and a lot of these movements. They just kind of believe it's all about me. It's all about what I want. It's not even that they're critical about society and they want change. It's if they wanted that, they'd probably be more like of a traditionalist. Like, you can be a traditionalist and say gender roles are out of whack. It should be redefined. Women should have much less power. Feminism needs to be crushed, and not be a MGTOW and not take your ball and go home and say it doesn't matter if there's more children. Nothing matters. I don't care if there's a future. I think Aaron clearly said that, and a lot of these kind of manosphere libertarian types will say that. The idea that there's anything resembling a society, a civilization, any kind of collective identity is seen as a bad thing. All that exists is me and maybe a couple of my buddies. So this kind of carries on to his view of morals and ethics. Despite his attempts to kind of insert a couple little bones for people who might take issue with his view that it's natural and to a large extent being a good man, as he describes it, to rape and pillage and steal and crush the weak. He kind of takes the view that any code of ethics is something that's created by women. Any kind of spiritual collective identity is not inherent to men. It's something created by women to enslave men and to get them to give them resources, basically. And yeah, I mean, I don't really get it. And there's this kind of constant idealization within the book of this idea that society was better when there was no society, when people lived in these small tribes, that men cannot have any loyalty to anything bigger than themselves. I mean, of course, the guy's an atheist, so it's just like, I guess my issue is, and why I've never been attracted to this, is like, okay, so we're against having a civilization. Okay, we've established that civilization is something women invented to rob men and to feminize them. Any kind of comfortable living or the idea of living standards, okay, that's bad. The idea of having a nation, of having a culture that you want to perpetuate, that's bad because that's collectivism. The idea of having traditions is bad. The idea of perpetuating your genes, the idea of having children and bringing new life into the world is bad. The idea of having any spiritual or moral code you live by is bad as well. So what remains? I don't know, just running around with your buddies robbing and pillaging, I guess. Because that's kind of like where it goes. Because like near the end, he's like, the answer is that it's going to happen The state is going to collapse. The world's going to go into anarchy. I think he suggests like we move to parts of the world that are in a state of anarchy. There's kind of a part where he idolizes Mexico and Latin America because it's such a dysfunctional society that men are able to assert their masculinity. And at first I'm like, oh, does he mean like the fact that Latin cultures just are slower to be dildoed and traditional gender roles persist there? No, he likes it because you have these like fucking gangs of cartels and shit running around and like cutting people's heads off and shooting people and selling drugs. And he views this as like a positive thing and something we as a society should embrace and like work towards, because this is what men are all about. And the idea of having police, the idea of having law and order, the idea of having laws are inherently hostile to men, and they're a product of women because women like personal safety and men don't like personal safety. Men like to constantly be in danger, to constantly be challenged, and the men who don't like that are a product of evolution that has rendered them having high IQs or being having too low testosterone, etc. So it's kind of like it's as I said, it's this whole idea that you can't have your opinions, you can't disagree with me. There is this thing. It's kind of like Marxism. There's this false consciousness that you're embodying, and your arguments are kind of irrelevant. So we have this idealization of what's called anarcho-primitivism, which is the idea that, like, kind of Rousseauian noble savage, that if we kind of tear down society, if we go back to how it was before, everything's just going to be great. Everything's going to work out. That's the kind of the natural state of man, and civilization and moral codes are bad. He takes the view that anything that it really attempts to restrain masculinity is bad, and he throws a couple bones out there and says, well, really we should try to balance the two. And he kind of says that in one or two paragraphs, and then he goes back to kind of idealizing various stuff. And people will say, well, he didn't do that, he didn't do that. Well, this is kind of my interpretation. As I said, he's kind of a slippery fellow who will post disclaimers. Like, they'll spend a whole chapter kind of idealizing something, and then we'll go back, etc. The fact that this attempts to present itself as being non-ideological is really kind of offends me. It offends me intellectually because there is a very definite thing to this. I find it to be MGTOW. I find this whole thing to be about men going their own way. I find it to be anarchistic. It's also very much kind of in line with the whole Nietzschean thing. He wants all men are called to be the Übermensch. All men are called to be aggressive, to dominate, to kind of violently compete each other. It kind of seems to me like it's funny because he criticizes Thomas Hobbes for saying that life is nasty, brutish, and short, but then he kind of endorses a way of life for all men that is nasty, brutish, and short. So I think kind of at the core of this is just a contempt for anything greater than oneself. The idea of anything external to a very stripped down, basic, biologically reductionist, and I mean that in the sense of just testosterone view of man and manhood. Any idea that a moral code is part of being a man, any idea of protecting your family, of having children, of law and order, of creating things as being kind of masculine goods, he's against. And he kind of throws a couple bones out like he does for the rest of it and says, oh, in a civilized society, the weak men try to turn their minds to intellectual pursuits. And they use that as kind of a way to justify themselves in a world where they can't be violent anymore. And, like, once again, it's just this kind of false consciousness thing. And he's like, well, men play video games or sports to get their destructive impulses out. And it's like it's kind of also this whole kind of condescending, oh, I discovered this. Well, this is something we've known like since Roman times. Like civilizations engage in social control. That's just what they do. And guys like this are like, but more freedoms, but more personal liberty. Like, well, fuck your personal liberty. That's just not like how the majority of people want the world to be. I mean, we have a couple of these LARPers who want to go and live in this like anarchistic society where we have just gangs of people like killing each other and robbing each other. But the vast majority of people don't want that. The vast majority of people want what Thomas Hobbes wanted, which is a central power to hold sway over us. They want law and order. They want a community. They want something greater than themselves. They don't want to be atomized individuals who just adhere to this nihilistic moral code. Because, I mean, who gives a fuck? Because in the long run, we're all dead. And why does it matter if you live your life as like some alpha male or not? It doesn't matter. Because you're going to die either way. So either you kind of adopt a view of something greater than yourself, something that'll carry off on after you're gone, a belief in the immortal soul, a belief in the nation, a belief in civilization, a belief in culture, a belief in perpetuating yourself and your values, or you don't, or you're just kind of a nihilist and you run around and do stuff. Because he criticizes society as being masturbatory, he criticizes pornography, he criticizes people engaging in pleasure seeking. But ultimately, that's what he wants. He wants to shun any concept of a greater good. He refers to greater good as a bad thing. He refers to moral codes as an innately bad thing. Once again, created by women in some kind of conspiracy or whatever, which kind of really reminds me of the patriarchy. Once again, he says, "Oh no, not all women are guilty of this. They're just acting in accordance with their nature." But it's a bad thing. Okay, well then why did they evolve that way? Why aren't men just capable of mitosis? Why can't, if men are just so great and we don't need any women in our society and women are evil, why can't men just reproduce through mitosis? Why are they different? Why aren't women just like men but have vajayjays? I mean, I don't really get it, and it's just there's this whole thing with these people. And it's true with a lot of rad trads I deal with too. They don't understand things can change. I'm not a progressive, but things change. I mean, I think it's very foolish to say they don't. I think it's foolish to say that the last 5,000 years or however long it's been a civilization have had no impact on us as a species, and that we need to go back to this because I said so. Because modernity has a couple problems with it. Well, and it does have a lot of problems with it. But that means we have to be primitives. We have to like throw spears at each other and shit. Well, could we try to fix the aspects of modernity? I mean, there were movements that had some success doing that. Fascism had a lot of success doing that. It ultimately collapsed because it sought out a lot of wars it really shouldn't have been involved in, and kind of overextended its resources, and was kind of defeated by a group of a coalition of all its ideological rivals. But it had largely succeeded kind of in restoring a lot of the traditional gender roles. It had succeeded in kind of trying to rebuild this collective identity and undo the damage done by feminism. So we could try and do that, but he says, no, we can't have a mass movement. We can't try to advocate things because the only people who can advocate are MGTOWs. There's no other rightist force in society that could do anything about it. Traditionalism is just another form of collectivism. It restrains the individual. And I just want to have fun, man. I just want to hang out with my guys and throw spears and mammoths and shit. So that's kind of like the attitude. He's like, no, we can't have violent revolution. Well, dude, you just spent the last, like, couple chapters talking about how we can't change society. So what remains other than violent revolution? He's like, men will not engage in it because they like society, because they like living the soft life. Yeah, I don't really see what's so bad about that. Like, why do we want to go back to a society where people live to be 20 years old? Their bodies literally are collapsing at that point from just tons and tons of hard labor, where there's no medicine, there's no sanitation, you gotta like shit in a hole and wipe your ass with leaves. Sorry for the crudeness. You gotta, like, you don't have antibiotics. If you get like a cut, you can die from that. You're hungry a lot of the time. You often die a slow death by starvation or exposure. Like a neighboring tribe could just come and kill you. There's no security. There's no natural property rights. Why are people? I guess we're pussies because we don't want to live that way. I guess we're pussies because we like having long lives where we can like better ourselves and do shit like that. So I guess we're pussies. I guess we all have to go back to living anarcho-primitivist lives. We have to abandon any concept of civilization. We have to just do all this shit because Jack Donovan tells us to do it. Um, and like what's it said, he won't accept it. He won't accept that there are people who disagree with him. He won't accept, from just my reading of it, that there are people like this is bullshit. I don't really care what like okay, so what? Cavemen acted a certain way. Who gives a shit? This is not the caveman times. This is like things have changed, and I'm not going to say this is the current year, but at the same time, if you think society and the way people act is identical to how they acted during the caveman times, that's fucking retarded. I mean, obviously, some things are eternal. Gender roles are eternal. Masculinity is eternal. I agree with him on that. But is masculinity always expressed the same way? Do we really need to be brutal killing machines in a society where that's no longer necessary to survive? Is this not a good thing? I agree, feminism needs to be crushed, diversity needs to be crushed, multiculturalism needs to be destroyed, global government is a bad thing. But to just embrace this anarcho primitivist, um, lulbertarian, the state is some evil thing that women created to steal from men, it sounds like some shit feminists say about the patriarchy. He just kind of replaced the patriarchy with the matriarchy. So there's this conspiracy to create the matriarchy that's been around since forever. Julia Matriarchus passed it back in Roman times. I can remember it well when it was created. It's not like it's natural for men and women to live together. It's not like the family unit developed pretty much the same way in every successful civilization. I don't know, guys. This is kind of my summation of my problems with MGTOW, and my summation of my problems with kind of anarcho-primitivism. And it's not just kind of nihilistic guys like this. There's also just a lot of like radical traditionalists who just kind of LARP too hard. There's some kind of extremely right-wing Catholics who kind of LARP with G.K. Chesterton too hard. The point of the matter is, unless you're going to have a military dictatorship and basically enforce this on the population, it's never going to happen. People are never going to give up their comfortable way of life, nor should they. That's my my view of the matter. This is Argent Templar signing out.